Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
The EU rules are trying to choke even that. And I just think, you know, I would join this protest in a heartbeat. And you were right to point out this stuff about them being right-wing. How dare they slate them as right-wing when these are real people whose livelihoods
and
are
remember,
being
a lot of
trashed.
people who work in the farm industry, Malone, get paid very little money.
They get paid,
Agricultural workers are very badly paid.
They get paid nothing, Pierce. And, you know, the profits... I think on Clarkins Farm, I read somewhere that I saw that when you sell it like a sheep's skin, it's 30 pence or something.
Right.
And you say, what?
Yeah.
And so you wonder how they can manage that. And I think after a year, Clarkson made a handful of pounds.
He made like 90 quid profit or something.
In a whole year working.
But Carol makes a really good point, though, doesn't she, Nikki, about this idea that we go to the supermarkets, we shop there, we eat our food, we don't often give it a thing. And the farmers have become so frustrated by this idea that they are not respected.
Absolutely. I mean, they're running what are effectively small businesses, often family businesses that are being passed down through generations. They also tend to know the land and the animals better than anyone else in those areas. You know, I'm all for green protests, you know, I'm all for climate change activism, but actually... the only way you can do that is gradually. It's exactly what we've seen with Port Talbot. You know, you can't just go in and say, you're not going to do it anymore this way. You've got to do it this way instead. The Tata Steel thing. Yes, exactly. You've got to do it this way instead. You know, lots of farmers are on board with protecting the planet, but they can't do it overnight. You've got to give them time. So they're protesting, you know, they're saying no farmers, no food.
When
well,
you say
can't
you
get any more
support some of
obvious.
these environmental protests, you're not one of these closet supporters of Just Stop Oil, are you?
I'm not a closet supporter. I think I've been quite open about Just Stop Oil.
No.
I don't like all their methods, but I do like the message.
Any of them.
But I do appreciate the message. Yeah, but sometimes you've got to do difficult things.
What they're asking for now, those protesters, are unrealistic. What these protesters are asking for is not unrealistic.
No.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good evening and welcome to County Durham, where 100 undecided voters are hoping to put their questions to the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak live on GB News. This is the GB News People's Forum with the Prime Minister. Please welcome the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Well, Prime Minister, thank you for being here tonight and joining us for our first GB News People's Forum of 2024. Now, at the start of an election year, we're here in the North East. It's a key battleground as the Conservatives try to keep the seats they won in the Red Wall back in 2019. Now, following promotion on GB News and social media, tonight's People's Forum audience were chosen independently by Survation, a third-party polling and market research agency. Everyone here is either undecided on who they vote for in a general election or open-minded to changing their vote. Now, GB News does not know the questions that are going to be asked tonight, and most importantly, neither does the Prime Minister. So, Prime Minister, over to you for your opening remarks.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephen. Well, good evening, everyone. Lovely to be here in Newton Aycliffe with you all. And thank you to GB News for hosting this first of its kind event. Now, I've been out and about across the country for the past couple of months, talking to people everywhere about their priorities and what we're doing to deliver on them. And tonight, I want to do the same thing with all of you. Now, I know things haven't been easy over the past couple of years. We had COVID and the impact that had on public services, the backlogs we're seeing. And just as we were recovering from that, a war in Ukraine that drove up all of yours and everyone else's energy bills. But even though we're not out of the woods yet, at the start of this year, I believe that we have made progress and that we're heading in the right direction. Now, at the beginning of last year, you may have seen that I set out 5 priorities, your priorities, that I wanted to focus on. And they were to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists, and stop the boats. Now, of course, there's more work to do on all of them, but we are making progress. Inflation has been more than halved, from 11% when I got this job to around 4% now. The economy's outperformed expectations. Debt is on track to fall, and because of all of that, we've been able to start cutting taxes. The number of illegal migrants crossing the Channel is down by 1/3 last year. And although, of course, there are challenges in the NHS, we've eliminated the longest waits, people waiting 2 years or a year and a half, and that is progress. But, as I said, there's more to do. And that's what the election this year is about. That's the choice. Do we stick with this plan, our plan, that is starting to deliver the change that you all want and the country deserves? Or do we go back to square one with Keir Starmer and the Labour Party? Now, we've just seen in the last week, with absolute chaos over the £28 billion decarbonisation policy, that Labour simply don't have a plan. And if you don't have a plan, you can't deliver any change. In contrast, what I want to do is give all of you the peace of mind that comes from knowing that your children can look forward to a brighter future and that all of us can have a renewed sense of pride in our country. That's what I know you want. And if we stick to the plan that is starting to deliver change, that's what I know that I can deliver for all of you. But this is about your questions and what's on your mind. So, Stephen, over to you.
Yeah, let's get things going. Thank you, Prime Minister. Now, the rules here are very simple. If you are asking questions tonight, then once you've stepped up to the microphone, please say your name and, if you want to, where you're from and what you do. So, let's have the first question.
Good evening, Prime Minister. My name is David from Darlington. My question is very simple. Since the 2019 election, when the Conservative Party won an 80-seat majority, do you believe that the Conservative Party have delivered anything of real substance and value since then?
Perfect. David, well, great to hear from you. I was in Darlington earlier today, working out of the campus that I set up there when I was Chancellor, which is a great example, actually, of levelling up. And you're asking what have we delivered over the past few years. You know, you don't have to look much further than Teesside, actually, to see what we're delivering for people. Now, that is an area that had been neglected by the Labour Party for decades. And if you look at what's happened over the last few years, we've got a great Conservative mayor in Ben Houchen, who's doing a fantastic job. We've taken advantage of Brexit to create a brand new free port in Teesside. And what's a free port? It's something that we couldn't properly do inside the European Union. Outside of it, we've created them. It attracts businesses with tax incentives, and businesses are investing in Teesside, creating jobs in the industries of the future. I put the Treasury campus in Darlington. Just think about that for a second. In Darlington, right? Forget about not being in London. Forget about putting it in the north. It's not in one of the big northern cities, not in Manchester, Leeds or Newcastle. It's in Darlington. Because it's places like Darlington that are now getting the focus from a Conservative government. You can see it in the infrastructure improvements that are happening. Darlington Station being upgraded. The high streets and town centres in Stockton and Thornaby. Not so far from here. Spennymoor, all of these places getting record amounts of investment. Blythe, new railway line. So, look, those are the changes that are happening. That is the plan that is working. And what is it about? It's about spreading opportunity, because that's what I care about. It's about making sure that wherever you live in our country, you can grow up and know that your dreams can be realised. You don't have to move away from your home. And I was speaking to young people today at that Darlington campus who were telling me about that. All from the northeast, up from Newcastle, from York, from Durham, from Teesside, from North Yorkshire, all of them working at the heart of government in Darlington. All of them said to me, this is incredible, I never thought I'd be able to do this, I didn't want to move down to London. That's what this Conservative government has done for young people across the north, as well as all the improvements which make sure that people can have pride in the place that they call home. And pride does come down to simple things like making sure your high street's clean and is safe, making sure the transport in your area works, that we can build youth clubs. That's what all that levelling up money is doing across the North East. And actually today, it's just funny, you had the first question, I was in Darlington in that office today. Like, you can see it happening around you. That is the change that you can feel. Talk to anyone in Teesside and they will tell you. And that's what I want to keep delivering. And if I can win another election, I can make sure that we can keep delivering that change. All of you can have the peace of mind that your kids can have that brighter future. We can have a renewed sense of pride in our country, and that's what I'm fighting for.
OK,
right,
Prime Minister,
next?
Thank you very much indeed. OK, let's see who's got our next question.
Good evening, Prime Minister. I'm Alex from London and I'm a student. As you know, the NHS is a key priority to most voters, and you said recently that you didn't make as much progress as you wanted to last year. But how can you convince us today that this year we're going to see some real meaningful change in the NHS and we'll see waiting lists fall? Yeah, thank you.
So, look, why should you trust me on the NHS? Well, first and foremost, I come from an NHS family. My dad was a GP. My mum was a pharmacist. I actually grew up working in my mum's pharmacy, delivering medicines to people who couldn't come in. That was my world. That was my parents' world. Those were their patients. That was our community. And I saw firsthand the incredible impact that primary healthcare in particular has on people's lives, the dependency that they have on it. So it's really important to me that we support our NHS. Now, I don't need to tell you the damage that COVID has done to so many things in our country, but particularly it's caused backlogs in the NHS, right? And whoever was Prime Minister, whoever was standing here tonight, there would be backlogs in the NHS because of what happened. You all know that. You're fair-minded people, right? But what are we doing about it? Well, first of all, we're putting in record amounts of money. So more money than the NHS has ever had. Some of you reasonably might say, well, hang on, maybe we should stop focusing so much on the money we're putting in and actually focus on the reform as well. So we're doing that too. More doctors and more nurses, because no one has ever trained enough doctors and nurses for the long term, but I've done that. Now look, we're the best one in the world. I probably will not be around in the 14 years that it takes to train the consultant that we're now starting to invest in, but it's the right long-term thing to do for our country, which is why I've done it. So massive expansion in the number of doctors and nurses we're training here, first ever long-term workforce plan, so that in the future we're less reliant on people having to come from abroad. And we're doing lots of new things, right? I could bore you to death with all the innovations, elective surgical hubs, community diagnostic centres, so you don't have to go to the big hospital to get your elective surgery or your MRI or CT scan. All of these things speed things up. Discharge hubs in hospitals, connecting up social care with the hospital so people can get home back to their communities quickly, speeds up times in A&E and ambulances. Use of the independent sector. So all of you now, if you and your families get referred by your GP for elective treatment, you can go on your app or talk to your GP and choose where to have your treatment. And that choice, giving you the power to choose where you want to go, speeds things up, improves competition and quality, and that's also helping. But look, we haven't made enough progress in spite of all those things I've told you about, which is a lot. The NHS is doing more than it's ever done before. We haven't made enough of a dent in the waiting list. Now, we've practically eliminated the number of people waiting the longest, 2 years, 1.5 years. But overall, the waiting list has largely risen over the past year. The good news is, though, we saw that it started to fall because we didn't have strikes for a period at the end of last year. And that has been a real challenge, and I'll just be honest with you about that. But in November, first month where we had absolutely no strikes in the NHS, do you know what? The waiting list fell by 100,000. Biggest 1 month fall in the waiting list in well over a decade outside of COVID. So that gives me the confidence that our plans can work and will work. The industrial action is something we need to work through, and we're going to continue to have those conversations with the doctors, and I'm sure we can talk about that later. But if we stick to the plan, I'm confident that we can bring it down. We got a sense that that was possible at the end of last year without strikes, and because of all those things that I've told you about, I know that it will just get better over time if we can get the strikes behind us.
OK, Prime Minister, thank you. Talking long-term plans, though, is difficult, isn't it, in all of this? It doesn't bring you immediate results, which is often a problem for politicians. We do need to think in the long term. OK, let's have our next question, please.
Hi, Rishi. It's Keith from Edinburgh. My question is about social care. Social care is chronically underfunded, and government has abdicated responsibility to local government, effectively making it a postcode lottery for many. Do you agree that it needs radical reform? And if so, what?
So, social care is something that is a particular challenge for councils. And you're right, if you talk to most local council leaders, I'll talk to you about the challenges in social care. I think you all know we've got an ageing population that puts pressure on. And that's why just the other week, we announced an extra £600 million for local government across the country. And it will mean that on average, this coming financial year, councils will have about 7.5% more money to invest in local services like social care than they did last year. So that gives you a sense of the scale. And of that extra money that we've put in, the bulk of it is ring-fenced specifically for social care, because that's where the challenge is. Now, I don't have an overnight fix to the challenges in social care. Of course I don't, right? But I do know that if we improve how social care works with hospitals, as I was talking about, it will make a difference, because that's where there isn't enough join-up. And that's why we're, as I said, working hard, and it won't happen overnight because the NHS is a big system and social care obviously is spread across the country, lots of individual local authorities. But bit by bit, we're joining those things up closer together, and that's how I think we will bring real improvements to bear, because, of course, it's important, right? I believe in a country where if you work hard all your life, you should have dignity in retirement. And social care is part of that contract we have with our grandparents and those who have come before us. So it's important that we get it right. I can't promise you it's going to fix overnight, but I can tell you we've just put a lot of extra cash in to help councils with some of that pressure going into next year.
Okay. Prime Minister, thank you. I know a lot of you will be wanting to get in touch with us about that one. It's such a difficult issue which has faced so many governments, but do we ever seem to get an answer where we can really see any significant difference within a short timescale at least? Let us know what you think about that one. Let's have our next question, please.
Good evening, Prime Minister. My name is Linda and I'm from Middleton in Teesdale and I'm retired. My question is, why are you so adamant about Rwanda when public documentation shows it isn't working and that it's not going to work? So can you be open and honest with everybody today and tell us what the next steps are?
Yeah. Well, Linda, great question. Right, I'm sure this is on all of your minds, so I might take a few extra minutes, if that's all right, Stephen, to kind of get into this properly. Look, why did I say stopping the boats was one of my 5 priorities, right? It's because I think illegal migration is profoundly unfair, right? I actually think our country is based on a sense of fairness, right? We are a people that we wait our turn, we put in our fair share, we play by the rules, right? And illegal migration actually breaks that sense of fairness. It erodes the sense of trust in our system. And I also think, as a matter of compassion, it's the right thing to do, because there are very vulnerable people who are being exploited by criminal gangs, and tragically, some of them losing their lives. And that isn't, I think, something that any of us can countenance carrying on. And then lastly, of course, there's the pressure on public services. Many of you in your communities would have seen your local hotel, like mine and like many others, taken over to house illegal migrants. It's costing all of you and everyone watching something like £7 or £8 million a day, right? And that is not something that is sustainable. So for all those reasons, Linda and everyone else, I think stopping the boats has got to be a national priority. It's certainly one of my priorities. Now, I said right at the beginning of my opening remarks, the plans we've put in place are working, we're making progress. Illegal migration is a good example of that. Last year, for the first time since the small boats thing became a phenomenon, the numbers were down. They weren't down by a little, they were down by over a third. Meanwhile, in the rest of Europe, they were up by quite a lot. Right? That didn't happen by accident, it happened because we worked really hard on lots of different things to start getting the numbers down. You may have heard about the new deal with Albania, which means that when people illegally migrate from Albania to here, because of the deal that I struck with Albania, we're able to return them. We returned something like 5,000 last year. What do you know? They stopped coming. Numbers were down by 90%. We've increased our cooperation with the French, joint patrols on the beaches, sharing intelligence, placing barriers in some of the rivers that lead up to the beaches in France. That's helped make sure that the interception rates remain strong. We started fighting crime upstream in Europe before people get anywhere close to the channel. We pass laws that allow us to arrest people connected with this awful trade. In the last 15, 18 months, we've arrested almost 1,000 people. We're starting to sentence them to hundreds of years in jail. We've done thousands of illegal enforcement raids. Again, all of those things are helping us to get the numbers down, which is why they're down by a third. The plan is working. But, to answer Linda's question, in order to fully solve this problem, we need a deterrent. We need to be able to say pretty simply and unequivocally that if you come to our country illegally, you won't get to stay. We want to be able to remove you, either to your home country if it's safe, like we've done with Albania, and for everyone else we need an alternative, and that's what Rwanda is about. So yes, we've made progress, down by a third, but in order to fully solve this problem, we need a deterrent. That's what Rwanda is all about, and that is why I'm absolutely committed to getting this bill through Parliament and getting this scheme up and running. And without that, we won't be able to fully solve this problem. And I think you all want me to solve this problem. The country certainly does, and I want to deliver for all of you.
Prime Minister, I'm not meant to really interject with any questions, but I've got to say a lot of people will be wondering, how do you get this through Parliament? This is a big problem.
Yeah, well, it's actually less... So it's in one sense less a question for me, and it's a question for Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, right? We are committed to getting it through Parliament, but unfortunately we don't have a majority in the House of Lords, as you know, and everyone else right now, as we speak, is lining up to do deals in the House of Lords to block us, right? We've already seen that in the Commons. They will keep doing that in the Lords, but I will keep going. I'm absolutely committed. I've fought very hard for this legislation. It's the toughest legislation anyone's seen. It will make sure that we can implement and operationalise this scheme and get flights off, get that deterrent working, and that's what I'm going to do. Right? And the question really is, why is everyone else lining up to try and stop me? Because I don't think that's right. I don't think that's what the country wants. We can't stop the boats unless we get this scheme up and running.
Prime Minister, thank you. That's the last question from me, everybody, I promise you, because this is not about me, it's about you. So let's have our next question, please.
Hi, Rishi Sunak. I've got so much to say, but such little time. My name is John Watt, and I'm one of the COVID vaccine injured in this country. I want you to look into my eyes, Rishi Sunak, and I want you to look at the pain, the trauma, and the regret I have in my eyes. We have been left with no help at all. Not only am I in here that's vaccine injured, there's another man over there whose life's been ruined by that COVID-19 vaccine. I know people who have lost legs, amputations. I know people with heart conditions like myself, Rishi Sunak. Why have I had to set up a support group in Scotland to look after the people that have been affected by that COVID-19 vaccine? Why are the people who are in charge, who told us all to do the right thing, have left us all to rot and left me and the thousands and the tens of thousands in this country to rot? Rishi Sunak, look me in the eye. When are you going to start to do the right thing? The vaccine damage payment scheme is not fit for purpose. In Scotland right now, according to the yellow card system, there are over 30,000 people that have had an adverse reaction to that vaccine and 200 deaths.
John, thank you very much indeed for your question.
It's time for you to start doing the right thing, Mr Rishi Sunak, and the rest.
You've made a really strong point, John. Prime Minister.
Yeah, John, well, I'm very sorry to hear about your personal circumstances, and you said someone over here also seems to have suffered by a similar thing. Now, obviously, I don't know about the individual situation that you're in.
We're silenced.
Well,
on social media and everything. Okay. We are silenced. We are the most silenced people in this country.
Silence in the press because my story in the press had to go to the government for comment, and they made them take all the stuff out.
Forgive me both.
I know, I'm happy. No one.
Okay.
John, no one is saying.
Yeah. Okay.
I've lost my house, my wife, and a successful career.
And sir, you raised some very valid points, I'm sure. What I've got to say is, though, we haven't got you on microphone, and as you know, we've got to get through this. I'm sure we can raise your points with the Prime Minister at a later date. But in the meantime, Prime Minister, if you could cover the issue.
I'm very happy to. So look, there is a vaccine compensation scheme that's in place, as you alluded to, in the NHS. Obviously, everyone individually will work through their cases. It's difficult for me to comment on anyone's individual case. I'm sure you'll appreciate that. I'm very happy to go and look at the cases, and I'm sure you'll get them to the team here. I mean, I'm very saddened and shocked to hear that you've been silenced by anybody. That is surprising to me, so please do get your details to Stephen and the team, and I will happily take that away. Of course, you should be able to speak about your experience, what's happened to you, and as I said, we have a compensation scheme in place for that, and I'll make sure that we're working through that. Obviously, I think you'll appreciate it's hard for me to comment on your specific circumstances, just not knowing them, and those things are...
Forgive me, sir, we haven't got a microphone on you, so our viewers and listeners won't be able to hear
I think
what
the
you're
last thing I'd say is, you know, we went through a pandemic, like everyone else. At the points when it came to the vaccine, those decisions were always taken on the basis of medical advice from our medical experts to tell us, as politicians, who are obviously not doctors, about how best to roll out the vaccine, what was in the public health interest, the priority order, how that should be done, who should be eligible. That was something that the doctors recommended on, and that's something that we followed. Now, obviously, if there are individual circumstances which haven't worked out, then that's why we have the compensation scheme in place, and I'll make sure that we follow up on your cases.
OK, Prime Minister, thank you. Gents, both of you, do give us your details. We will get that to the Prime Minister, and as he said, he will, I'm sure, look at that for you. In the meantime, let's move on to another question, sir.
Good evening, Prime Minister. My name's Jack. I'm 28. I'm from York. My question is, the Reform Party are surging in the polls. They're hitting a note with many disillusioned Conservative voters like myself. What are you going to do to convince traditional Conservative voters that their vote is still better off with you?
Yeah, in one sense... In one sense, I can completely appreciate your frustration, right? And that's because it's been a tough couple of years, right? When we go through the things that we've been through as a country, as I said, energy bills, more than doubling, right? Again, starting to come down, the economic strain that that's put on all your family budgets, the impact of COVID on backlogs, NHS, waiting for appointments, like all of those things are real things that will cause you and everyone else an enormous amount of frustration. And I can completely understand that. But I think fundamentally what you want and what I want are the same. Right? What I talked about at the beginning, the things that I'm focused on, right, the values that are important to me, I think are things that we probably share. And all of you who clapped, I'd probably say the same thing. Right? I think actually we want the same things for our country. We share the same values, whether that's on controlling spending, cutting your taxes to ease the cost of living, making sure that we have strong borders and we tackle illegal migration. Right? These are things that we have in common. These are all things that we want. And what I'd say to you and everyone else is the next election is a straightforward choice. At the end of it, either Keir Starmer or I am going to be Prime Minister, right? And a vote for anyone who is not a Conservative candidate is simply a vote to put Keir Starmer into number 10. So the question for you and everyone else who clapped, I completely appreciate your frustration, is who do you want to see in government after the next election? Who do you think it's more likely to deliver on the things that you care about? Right? You talked about those traditional Conservative things, right? Controlling spending, cutting taxes, a strong economy, bringing mortgage rates and inflation and borrowing down, strong borders, police on the streets, right? All those things that you care about, who's more likely to deliver them? Because it's certainly not Keir Starmer, right? Now, that's the thing, and that's the choice, right? A vote for anyone who is not us is a vote for him, right? We've just seen over the last few days, you've seen what's happened, right? Keir Starmer has been running around for the last year trying to tell everybody, OK, the Labour Party's changed, right? Well, look what just happened in Rochdale. A candidate saying the most vile, awful conspiracy theories, anti-Semitic. And what happened? He stood by him, sent cabinet ministers to support him, right? Until, as apparently literally 5 minutes before I walked on tonight, under enormous media pressure, has decided to change his mind. That's not principled, right? Not principled at all. So, no, the Labour Party hasn't changed. It's not change, it's a con, right? And that's what you have to remember. A vote for anyone who's not me, who's not your Conservative candidate, is a vote to put him, with his values and his party, in power. You saw it last week, what that would mean for the economy. Can't tell you how he's going to pay for £28 billion decarbonisation policy, which means higher taxes for you and everyone else. stood by this person in Rochdale until the media pressure got too much. Like, that's the values. Has doing everything he can right now to frustrate the passage of our Rwanda bill in the House of Lords. Do you want any of that? No, I don't think you do, right? And I'm going to keep delivering for you. You and I want the same things, and that's how we're going to get them, because I'm going to win the next election.
Prime Minister, thank you. Well, that's the big argument, isn't it? That is the big argument. You'll be able to have your say on that, of course, as always, on GB News. Let's have our next question, please.
My name is John from Darlington. I'm retired. And I'm worried about the local council finances. They're in such a parlous state. So why not review the council tax system so that a Band D in Darlington no longer has to pay the same council tax as the Band D in London, when a house in Darlington might be 150k and the same house in London would be 1.5 million?
Right. So, council tax, local government funding. I mean, a little bit what we touched on before, right? Council tax and local government funding are all mixed together. So in all your local areas, the money that your council is going to spend is a mix of what they raise locally and what they get centrally from government. Now, ultimately, those individual decisions are for your local councils, right? They set their council tax levels, and that's not something that we do centrally at government. What we do is say, look, there's a limit to what we think they should put up your council taxes without asking you in a referendum. Right, so that's our involvement in the council tax system, but ultimately it's your local councillors who are going to set those council taxes. And, you know, what I'd say to you, a couple of things. First of all, just reiterating what I said previously, we've provided an extra £600 million for local councils, which means this year they'll have about 7.5%, as I said, more to invest in local services than they did last year. Now, of course, that will vary by council, but on average. And last year they had something like 9% more to invest in local services than the year before. Right, so that's been the last 2 years' worth of increases in funding for local services. Now, I know there's never enough money, people always want more, but you guys can make up your own minds about whether you think that seems reasonable. Given all the other priorities that we also have, we've talked about the NHS, for example, particularly being the big call on public services, and we haven't got into the cost of living and tax, but I'm sure we will soon. And, you know, that's one thing I want to do is keep all your taxes coming down. So, look, that's the balance that we strike, and ultimately I think it's right that you elect your own councillors, they set council tax, and the simple thing I'd say is, look, if you want lower council tax, when it comes to the local elections in May, vote Conservatives, because that's what we deliver in local government.
OK, Prime Minister, thank you. It's going to be interesting if tax is brought up. I have no idea, I've got to say, but perhaps tax is going to be a question that arises. Let's see from our next questioner.
Robin White, I'm a barrister from Somerset. Why should LGBT people vote Conservative?
Well, Robin, thank you for the question. Now, if you look at our record over the past few years, it's one that I hope you and everyone else is proud of, right? It was a Conservative government under one of my predecessors who made sure that we had same-sex marriage. And more recently, we're making sure that all our public services work better. That we've made changes in the NHS for provision of healthcare services for same-sex couples, and that gives, hopefully, you and everyone else a sense that this is a country whose values are reflected in our party and in government, and that is that it's a compassionate, tolerant place. And we want to make sure that people, whatever their background, right, are respected and treated with dignity. Right? That's the kind of country that I believe in. And it's not just about LGBT, it's about absolutely everything, right? Quite frankly. Like, this is a place which has always been welcoming, tolerant and inclusive. That's who we are as a country, and I think that's what we will always will be, and I'll always make sure that that's the case while I'm Prime Minister.
Forgive me slightly, but I think some of the issue may be less about the LGB and more about the T, Prime Minister. More about the trans issue.
Well, on that issue, look, my view on that is relatively straightforward. Look, first of all, right, for people who are going through that, particularly children, right, we have to be really sensitive about it. We should be understanding, we should be tolerant and compassionate, as I said, because that's who we are as a people, respecting everyone and their differences. But I also think on that issue that, particularly when it comes to questions around women's safety, women's health, that biological sex is important. And I don't think that should be a controversial thing to say. I think that is a relatively common sense view that I think is held by the vast majority of people. And unfortunately, this debate over the past few years has become incredibly charged and polarised. But I really don't think anything I just said, quite frankly, should be controversial. Are we respectful and tolerant of people and their differences, particularly when they're going through things that are sensitive? Yes, of course we are. Do we think biological sex was important when we're thinking about women's safety, women's health? Yes, of course, I think most people would think that is important. And in particular, I think these things are important when we're considering our children, which is why we've recently published guidance for schools about how to deal with these issues in our classrooms. Teachers' unions asked the government to do that. And you'll see what I've said reflected in that guidance, but also making it clear that parents should be involved when these issues arise at school and concern children. It's of course right that parents should be involved in those things, and we should be particularly sensitive about these issues when it comes to children.
Okay. Prime Minister, thank you. Robin, thank you for the question. Sir, over to you.
Good evening, Prime Minister.
Good evening. What a jacket. Look at that.
How kind of you. My name is John Slater, and I'm in performing arts. Only for the last 50 years. And my question concerns devolution. I live in Bridlington, which, as you probably know, is part of the East Riding of Yorkshire. And shortly we are to be combined with Hull to become a new devolved area. Now, in previous devolvements, if that's the correct word, there have been provision and proposals with regard to spending on culture and the arts. As far as we are aware, for our devolution, Hull and the East Riding of Yorkshire, there is no proposal for spending on culture and the arts. Why is that?
Right, well, sounds like a great shame. And we're losing out on your talent, John. Right. So look, I don't know is the simple answer, so I will go away and take a look at that. I'll say two quick broad points. One is you have the most wonderful priory, don't you? The priory of church or cathedral. I've done any questions from there years and years ago. It's really lovely. So lucky you for living there. I'd say a couple of things. One is devolution you touched on. We haven't touched on it tonight. I think that's a good thing. We've done a lot of it. What does that mean? It means putting you more in charge of the things that are happening in your area, making sure that we devolve powers and funding and responsibility to politicians that are more local to you. I talked for the first question, it was at David from Darlington, when we talked about Ben Houchin, who's the mayor here in Teesside. You can see the incredible change that he's brought here. Andy Street in the West Midlands, again, doing an incredible job. We think that's a good thing for the country, so we've done a decent amount of that, particularly here in the north. But then secondly, culture. Look, I think the cultural sector in our country is something that we should be enormously proud of. Enormously proud of, right? And for a couple of reasons. You know, one is it obviously is very important in all our communities. And I remember as a kid performing quite probably not brilliantly in a Christmas carol at my local theatre in Southampton, and what an incredible experience that was. And we'll all have fond memories of that. So it's an important part of our social fabric. It's also part of our soft power, right? It's how we project ourselves across the world through our creative industries, the film, TV, productions, everything that you know. But the thing that people probably don't appreciate about that sector is the economic contribution it makes to our economy. It is a powerhouse industry for us. It employs millions of people across the country. And like, you know, we're here in the Northeast. Actually, the Northeast is one of the areas which is booming when it comes to film production. I went to Hartlepool not so long ago, where we're making one of our levelling up investments in an enormous studio facility there. And they literally can't grow fast enough. We just need to help them train more and more young apprentices to get into the industry. So I think it's a fantastic industry. I cared about it so much that in the pandemic, now you know, it's probably where most of you got to know me, where I've popped up on your TV screens talking about this thing called furlough, which no one knew what it was at the time. But the other thing we did in the pandemic that I'm proud of is something called the Cultural Recovery Fund. Because I knew that if we didn't do anything, all our incredible, precious theatres, whether that's in Bridlington or anywhere else, the Georgian Theatre in Richmond, where I am in North Yorkshire, all these places would be lost. A year without any business. We'd lose all these wonderful venues that are so important to our communities. So we actually put together a fund which supported them all. And as a result of that, we've protected thousands across the country. Probably in every single one of your communities, in your local areas, there'll be something like a small theatre, maybe a comedy store, something like that, that will have been supported by this Cultural Recovery Fund, so that we could keep all of them together. So we emerged on the other side, they were there to entertain us and enrich our lives all over again, which is what they're doing. So look, I'm with you. I think it's really important, and I will go and check that out for your devolution deal, if that's all right. Good, fine. And that really is a great jacket.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'm glad this hasn't turned into a pantomime tonight, that's all I'm saying. Next question, please.
Hi, I'm Josh. I'm a student from Shrewsbury, and I'm 19. The UK is estimated to be short of over 1 million homes. But despite this, your party have scrapped the house building target, and you've scrapped Michael Gove's proposed planning reforms that would have liberalised the building of houses. You say you have a plan, Rishi. Do you have a plan to fix the supply crisis in British housing?
Yeah, so first of all, you said you're 19, Josh, is that right? Right, so look, I want you, I'm assuming you don't own your own home at the moment. No, I want you to experience what I experienced and what probably most of us, if I look around the room, have experienced at one point, and that is getting the keys to your first home, right? I mean, it's an incredibly special feeling. Those of us who experience it remember it, right? We'd start in a flat and hopefully build up over time, create a family there, build a life there. It's a magical, wonderful thing. And when I think about the type of country that I want to build as Prime Minister, it's one where aspiration and ambition are celebrated. And aspiration is about owning your own home, right? So, look, I think it's really important that we make sure that you and everyone of your generation can do that. Now, look, I'm going to be honest, I don't have an overnight fix. It's become trickier, particularly in the southeast, right? And it varies by region, actually. Funnily enough, again, I was talking to some people in the office in Darlington today, and they had just bought their first home and they were in their late 20s, right? And you know, so it does vary where you are. But what can we do? Well, we need to build more homes, and that's what we're doing. So in this Parliament, we talked about 1 million homes. You said we are going to deliver 1 million homes in this Parliament. We said we were going to deliver 1 million homes this Parliament. We are on track to deliver 1 million homes in this Parliament. So yes, the plan is working. Right? We're also making it easier to get on the housing ladder. So stamp duty, you know, that's when you're trying to buy that first home, that stamp duty was a real problem. But now we've cut stamp duty for first-time buyers. You probably won't know this, but something like 85% of first-time buyers right now don't pay any stamp duty when they buy their first home. So it saves them thousands of pounds. That's the tax cut that we introduced. And most recently, though, we wanted to go further. There are these old EU rules called nutrient neutrality. I won't get into the details of it. These legacy rules from the EU, they're defective. They don't actually do anything to help the environment, but they are blocking 100,000 homes from being very quickly delivered across the country. Now, we were going to pass a law to change that and protect the environment, and that would have very quickly unlocked 100,000 homes for you and people of your generation. What did the Labour Party do in the House of Lords? They blocked it, right? And this is what I talk about. And I talk about Keir Starmer, and I say he doesn't have a plan, doesn't have principles. This is a guy who's saying, oh, yes, we've changed, we want to build homes, all the rest of it. But there was an opportunity. We put a law down in the House of Lords to change this defective EU law that we've inherited that's blocking 100,000 homes. And what did they do? They blocked it, right? So, look, do I know we've got more to do? Of course we do, because it is too hard. And I'd love it to be easier, right? But we are making progress. We are building the homes, and we will keep going. And actually, we'll be making some more announcements about that this week, and you may have seen a little bit about that over the weekend from Michael, making it easier to build in certain places where we do need to do homes, but do that in a way that brings everyone with us. But there was an opportunity for Keir Starmer to do the right thing and make it easier for you and your generation to have those 100,000 homes, and he said no. So we're going to keep letting go, because I want you to feel what I feel and what many of us did, because it's a very special thing, and that's the kind of country we want, where you and your friends can own that home.
So it certainly is a very special thing. I know, I think most of us probably feel very lucky now when we know we own our own homes. It is a really important thing. OK, we talk about a whole different range of subjects that we're covering tonight, which is really important, because it's about what matters to you and to our audience here, who are representative of the nation, we should point out. OK, let's have our next question, sir.
Evening, Prime Minister. My name's Naresh. I've come up from London. My question is, why aren't you making the UK more self-sufficient in power, rather than paying exorbitant prices to other countries, e.g. France?
Right. Naresh, thanks for the question. Excellent question. So, I agree with you, right? We need to be more energy secure, right? I agree with you so much that I actually created an entire government department for it. So for the first ever time, we now have a department for energy security, right? So it's not just a department for net zero and climate change, it's a department for energy security and net zero, because I think you're right. And the war in Ukraine just highlighted why we need to improve our energy security. So look, we are doing that, right? We're building new nuclear for the first time in a long time, not just the big gigawatt power stations, but we're looking at small modular reactors as well. We're investing in renewables. Right now, Ørsted is building one of the world's biggest offshore wind farms off the East Coast. We've already got not just the world's biggest offshore wind farm, but the second, the third, and the fourth too. So we are doing more homegrown renewables. We're doing nuclear. But crucially, we're doing a couple of other things too. And these are a bit more controversial, right? I think that in order to have energy security, we need to focus on the energy we have here at home, and that means the North Sea oil and gas, right? Now, even the Independent Committee for Climate Change say that we will need some oil and gas in 2050, right? So the question is, well, where would you rather get that from? Are we better off getting it here at home? Good for the economy, good for jobs, good for energy security, or are we better off importing it from halfway around the world with 3 times the carbon emissions? To me, that's pretty straightforward, right? That's why we've said we will keep issuing licenses in the North Sea. Right? Use our energy here at home, build our energy security. That's the right thing to do for the country. It's the right long-term thing for our national interests. What did Keir Starmer and the Labour Party do? What do you expect them to do? Virtue signalling, and they opposed it. Right? That's not going to help our energy security, and it's also not going to help cut your bills. Right? Because that's the other thing I want to do, is make sure that as we transition to this more secure, greener future, which we all want, right? At the end of the day, we all have kids, we have grandkids, we want to leave them the environment in a better state than we found it. But we need to do that in a pragmatic way, right? And there are far too many people who view that project as something ideological. They want to race to net zero regardless of the cost on you and your families. I don't think that is right. Right? We have decarbonised faster than any country in the world. Now, you might have seen just last week, only major economy to have halved carbon emissions. Who's that? Well, that would be the UK. Right? Not going to take any lectures from anyone else. So I changed course in autumn. You may remember, right? I made a speech. I got a lot of criticism for it. People came at me, but I said, no, this is the right thing to do. We've done more than anyone else. We're going to do more than anyone else. So we can do this in a more proportionate, pragmatic way that's going to save you and your families £5,000, £10,000, £15,000. That were the plans that I inherited, forcing you to rip out things, replace things before that was necessary. I said, no, we're not going to do any of those things, right? Because I want to save you those thousands of pounds. We're going to get to net zero. We're going to do it in a proportionate way. And at the same time, we're going to build our domestic energy security. That is a common sense approach to this issue. And I think it's one that I hope the vast majority of you in this room and everyone else absolutely supports, because it's the right one for our country.
Okay. Prime Minister, thank you. Naresh, I think you struck a note with the audience there. Thanks very much indeed. Who's got our next question for us tonight?
Thank you, Prime Minister. My name's Daniel. I'm assistant head of an independent school on Teesside. Independent schools in regions such as the North East are not the Etons of this world, and one of Labour's few remaining policies is to charge VAT on independent school fees. Now, many of our families are middle-income families that make lifestyle compromises to be able to invest in their children's education. Any rise in fees would be very difficult for them to manage, meaning their children would likely end up back in a swamped state sector. What are your plans for education, and why are you not doing more to call out a policy that is at best ideological grandstanding, but at worst fiscally irresponsible and playing politics with the education of young people?
Oh, very well said, Daniel. We'll put you in front of a TV camera, solve that problem. Yeah, so what are we doing on education? Look, I got into politics partly because of education, right? I think education is the most powerful thing that you can do to transform people's lives. I often say that there isn't a silver bullet in my job in public policy, but the closest thing, although we have to a silver bullet, is education. If we can create a world-class education system in this country, that is the best way to transform young people's lives. And we are making progress. When I say the plan is working, by God is it working in education, thanks to the reforms that have happened under the Conservative governments over the past few years. Now, when we came in office in 2010, we were plummeting down the league tables, standards were slipping. Because of our reforms, all of that is reversed. We are just marching up those international league tables. That's how well our kids are doing at school, outperforming SNP-run Scotland schools, Labour-run schools in Wales, right, because of our reforms. Our kids here now are the best readers in the Western world, thanks to the phonics reforms that you'll be familiar with in your school, right? We changed how we teach our kids. We focused on rigor and standards in the classroom, giving parents more information and choice. All of that has worked. The other thing that we focused on and will keep focusing on is skills. Because I don't believe in this idea that everyone has to go to university to fulfill all their dreams. I don't think that's right. I really think that there are multiple routes for young people to achieve success and fulfill all their aspirations, which is why we've invested hugely in apprenticeships. Right? Not just in improving the quality of them, not just spreading them out so they're available in almost every job, but also just changing how they are perceived. It really bugged me that in a classroom, and you'll be familiar with this, right? You had a bunch of kids who were going off to university and they would all focus on the UCAS system that I did, right? Everyone will be obsessed with their UCAS forms and everything else. And if you weren't applying to university, you felt a bit like a second-class citizen because you weren't doing that. And I don't think that's right. So for the first time this past year, we've put apprenticeships on the UCAS system to start to show people, look, hang on, there isn't one that's better than the other here. And if I am fortunate enough to get your support to have another term, the big reforms I want to do in education, I set them out in the autumn. I want to make sure that our post-16 education is reformed so it raises the standards. So we make sure all our young people have a basic foundation in maths and English. It means that we will bring together the best of technical and academic education so there isn't this artificial divide in the classroom into a high-quality qualification. We'll make sure that people spend more time in the classroom to get us in line with our international peers. So that's the next bit of reform I think we can do in the education system, particularly focused on skills and that technical side, making sure it has the resources and the parity of esteem it needs. Because if we can get this right, as I say, we will do the most wonderful thing for our young people. And thank you to you and all your colleagues for what you do, because it's incredible. You're changing people's lives every day. And I just want to keep supporting you, because that is how we're going to make this an incredible country that spreads opportunity far and wide. And it's an incredibly conservative thing to do. It's how I was raised, and it's what I want to do for everyone else. And actually, you talked about the private school thing at the beginning, so I might touch on that for a second. Right, the people you're talking about are people like my parents. Right, my parents came here without a huge amount with my grandparents, right? But they worked really hard to give their kids a better life. And for them, they thought education was the best way to do that. They put everything into making sure my brother and sister and I had a great education. And look, we got help along the way with scholarships and things as well. But that was what was important to them. That's what aspiration means to me. You know, I get attacked by Keir Starmer because of where I went to school. And I said to him once, actually, I said, you're not really attacking me, you're attacking my parents. And you're attacking everybody like them that works hard to aspire for a better life for them and their family. I think that's wrong. I don't think it's British, and that's not the type of country that I'm going to build.
Prime Minister, thank you. We've still yet to touch on that tax question. I don't know if it's coming up next, sir.
It isn't. Good evening, Prime Minister. I'm Colin from North Yorkshire, retired. Given the number of Conservative MPs not standing at the next general election and the number of factions within the party, there appears to be a lack of leadership at the head of the party. What are your plans to bring the factions together, to build a team and to stop voter defections to Reform and other parties?
Yeah. Whereabouts are you from, Colin?
North Yorkshire.
Whereabouts in North Yorkshire?
Malton.
Oh, right, OK. Right, fine. So I'm not a million miles from you in North Allerton.
Not quite you.
Yeah. So, look, I think, actually, all Conservative MPs do have a unity of purpose, and that is that we want a Conservative government returned at the next election. And it just brings us back to a simple choice. right? Like, at that election, there is a choice between me and Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, between the Conservatives and the Labour Party, and whatever the difference is within our party, and of course there are going to be differences, of course we're going to debate things, that's what democracy is, that's what Parliament is there for. But we are united in our purpose of wanting to deliver a country for you where your children can look forward to a brighter future, where you have that peace of mind, where we can have a renewed sense of pride in your country. Those are things that unite all of us. And actually, as we come into a focused election year, I know that that's what my colleagues all believe, and I think that they will focus their attention on Keir Starmer and the opposition, because that's what this is about, right? It's not about the small, minute differences between us on issues. You know, there's a lot of coverage about the conversations and debates we were having on the illegal migration bill, right? OK, there may be some differences of opinion about how best to implement the Rwanda scheme, right? Those differences are an inch. But the real difference is the difference between us and the Labour Party. That difference is a mile, right? And that's the choice for all of you and everyone else, right? That's the choice at the election, right? On that issue in particular, but on every other issue. And I actually think, you know, my colleagues are united in that purpose of wanting to see a Conservative government returned at the next election, because they believe that is the right thing for our country. And I'm confident that we will fight hard to deliver that.
OK, Prime Minister, thank you. Let's have our next question.
Hi, I'm Julie, pharmacy technician.
Oh, could you, Julie, forgive me, could you just edge a little bit closer to the mic? I know.
So I'm a pharmacy technician. I've worked within the NHS for 25 years, and I'm currently working in a mental health hospital. Conditions now are the hardest that I've ever seen within the NHS. But without thinking about the staff, the people working within it, I want to focus on the patients themselves. How do you plan to improve conditions for the patients, put money towards resources to treat the patients, and stop wasting money unnecessarily?
Yeah. Well, Julie, I'm going to give you one specific example. And thank you for what you do, specifically because, as I said, my mum was a pharmacist, so I know exactly what you did, and I spent probably most of my childhood doing what you're doing now, or doing a kind of kids version of it when I was working. And the one thing I'm going to tell you about that makes life easier for all of you and for patients concerns pharmacy. And we announced it the other week. You may or may not have seen it, but I think it's going to be brilliant. And that is, for 7 of the most common ailments that we all have, things like sore throats, ear infections, sinusitis, now, right now, you don't have to go and see your GP for those things. You can go and see your pharmacist. So Julie and her colleagues, and you can get the medicines you need direct from your pharmacist without having to make a GP appointment, with the hassle that is, the time you might have to take off work, or your kids, if you have young kids, take them out of school, all those things. Done away with all of that. You can go and see your pharmacist for those 7 common things. Now, that is something that's going to make a major difference to patients, to families, to all of you and everyone else in our country. It's an example of us doing something practical, reforming, to just improve quality of healthcare, improve the speed of healthcare. And as I said, based a bit in my experience of working in a pharmacy. And many of you will know your pharmacist, you'll know the difference they make in their communities. That's certainly what my mum did growing up. It was inspiring to me. I saw it firsthand. And our pharmacists today are so well trained. They're able to do all of this for you. Pharmacies have consultation rooms, as you may have seen. So that change that we've worked hard on and now just implemented in the past few weeks means that I think I'd save all of you, hopefully, time when you next get ill with one of those 7 things. You just go straight to your pharmacy, get the medicines you need, and hopefully you'll remember this. And Julie and all her colleagues are going to have all this extra work to do, which is great, because it means we're also supporting our pharmacy sector at the same time. And that is just an example of us practically improving healthcare in this country. Look, is that going to solve all our problems? Of course it's not. But it's a good practical example of something that will make all your lives a bit easier, empowering patients, and that's what we should be doing.
Julie, thank you very much indeed. Now, right.
Slightly worried by this.
Look at fear in your eyes, Prime Minister. I just thought it might be...
not Conservative Party raffle.
No. I just thought, because we've got so much to get through, we're going to delve your hand in here. We've got some questions, more questions, and if you just... You can't read them first. Get your hand in.
Well, you know what, actually? So I'm very happy to do that. I don't know how much time we've got left. I am genuinely surprised we've not had any questions about the economy, the cost of living, right? So that I'm just genuinely puzzled by that.
All right, here we go.
So that would be the first time I've ever done one of these where that hasn't come up. I can't imagine all of you are really happy about the tax you're paying and don't want to complain. Well, I mean, has no one got an economy, cost of living, tax question? Right, here we go. Okay. Now we got some people. Right,
gentlemen.
Are you getting out your payslip? Gosh, right.
You've got your payslip. I tell you what. Let me grab this. Oh, here we go. This is what we call working on the hop, sir.
Right.
Well, do you want my name in it?
Sorry?
My name's John. I'm from Glasgow. I work as an aircraft engineer and I'm also a company director. My question is, with the high tax rates in Scotland and the inferior services compared to what you have in England in education, healthcare, what would your plan be to make Scotland vote for the Conservatives and make them more votable?
Right, well, did everyone hear John's question? Right, no. So actually, John's question was about the difference in tax rates between Scotland and England and not being very happy with them. We've got good reason not to be very happy about them, right? Because they're higher, right? They're higher. So if you earn a bit more than £28,000, you pay higher tax in Scotland, right? And that's because of the budget that the SNP government just put in place recently. And if you earn a lot more than £28,000, you pay a lot more tax, right? But they try and say, oh, this is just for high earners. It's not. Anyone earning just over £28,000 is paying higher tax in Scotland. I feel the exact figures at the top of my head, but something 28,000 something. Now, why is that? It's because we're starting to cut taxes now, right, for all of you. And this is something I really wanted to deliver. And lots of you probably got frustrated with me that I hadn't done it a year ago and all the rest of it. But I said to you then, look, this is something I want to do. Of course I want to do it, right? I believe so deeply that hard work should be rewarded. That's the type of country that I want to build, right? You guys work so hard. Everyone works hard. I want hard work to be rewarded. That means I want to cut your taxes so you can keep more of your hard-earned money. But when I got this job, inflation was running at 11%. And just like Margaret Thatcher and Nigel Lawson many years before me, I knew that the right thing to do for our country economically was to get inflation down first, control spending and borrowing, get inflation down, and then we could start responsibly cutting taxes. And we were able to deliver that in the budget at the end of last year. It kicked in all of your January pay slips. So for everyone in work, that tax cut is not small. Right? The national insurance rate has been cut from 12% to 10%. So for someone earning an average salary, about £35,000, that tax cut is worth £450 this year, and it kicked in January. Now, you might say, yes, about time. What next? I can appreciate that, right? And I've said, look, when it's responsible to do so, of course we want to keep cutting your taxes because that is important to me, because it's, as I said, about rewarding hard work. But it's got to be done as part of a plan. And because we've got a plan, and because that plan, as I said right at the beginning, is starting to work, and you can see it, if we stick with it, then there are better times ahead, right? Because we've got a plan and we stuck to it, inflation is down from 11 to 4%, right? Wages have now been rising steadily for the last 6 months above prices. Mortgage rates are starting to come down, right? We've controlled welfare, and so we're in a position where, because the economic conditions have improved, we can start cutting your taxes. Now, that's the type of party we are, that's the type of government we will be, and the contrast is very clear. You can see it in Scotland with the SNP. You can see it in Wales with the Labour Party. Many of you will be small business people. Many people watching will be small businesses. If you own a pub, a restaurant, a cafe, we've cut your business rates by 75% this year to support our high streets, support those businesses and the jobs. Labour government in Wales hasn't done that, right? Those pubs are all paying more. And Keir Starmer can't tell you how he's going to pay for his £28 billion green decarbonisation policy. What does that mean? That means higher taxes. And that, let's go right back to where I said at the beginning, stick with the plan. The plan is working. You can see that on the economy. You can see it in lower taxes. The alternative is going back to square one with the Labour Party. He can't tell you what he's going to do differently. He doesn't have a plan, and that means we won't get the change that our country deserves. That's the change that I want to deliver for all of you.
Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed.
Right, OK, we're going to get into the box.
I made that box as well, I have, you know. It's a shame it hasn't been used. Well, thank you, Prime Minister, very much indeed for joining us for the first GB News People's Forum of this election year. And thank you, of course, to our studio audience for taking part. Thank you very, very much indeed. Now, we are hoping that the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, will accept our invitation to take part in one of these People's Forums. Let's hope he does. But for now, let's take you back to London from the glorious North East to Patrick Christie's.
Well, welcome to this very special edition of Patrick Christie's tonight, where we react to that People's Forum with the Prime Minister, and what a show that was. We've got the new Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, James Daly, and also Labour MP Rosie Duffield very shortly. We've got the results of our bombshell exit poll. Has Prime Minister Rishi Sunak managed to convince anyone from that audience of undecided voters to actually vote for him? Tory Cabinet Minister for Common Sense, Esther McVey, will be live to give her verdict, and the man giving Mr Sunak sleepless nights, the leader of Reform UK, it is Richard Tice in the studio for us. I've got my panel of top pundits as well. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, journalist and Labour Party advisor Mike Buckley, and ex-Brexit Party MEP Belinda Talusi. We are also going to be joined by our political editor Christopher Hope for the very, very latest from that venue for the political roundup. But right now, I'm going to get the thoughts of that Conservative MP for Bury North, and crucially as well, the new Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party. It is James Daly joining us live here in the studio. James, thank you very, very much. Now, look, to introduce to the fray straight away, Rishi Sunak's comments on Rwanda, which I know is a massive issue for you, a massive issue for a lot of voters as well. Let's play the clip.
I think illegal migration is profoundly unfair. Right? I actually think our country is based on a sense of fairness, right? We are a people that we wait our turn, we put in our fair share, we play by the rules, right? And illegal migration actually breaks that sense of fairness. It erodes the sense of trust in our system.
James, Rwanda won't work though, will it?
Of course it'll work. I think we have a choice, and the Prime Minister framed this choice very well, I thought, tonight. We've got open-door immigration, open-door borders with Keir Starmer, or we've got the Rwanda policy, a Rwanda policy which many other countries throughout the world are looking at and implementing, which is part of the suite of measures, which is going to tackle the small boats issue, tackle immigration, and we're going to get those planes in the air. But, Patrick, remember, the Rwanda policy is a deterrent. If in 2, 3, 4 years' time anybody's being sent over there, it has failed on the merits of what it is. It is stopping people coming to the French border, getting in on those boats and coming over. And can I just tell you one other thing? I'm one of the few MPs who's actually been on the beaches in Calais, spoken to people about this, spoken to French officials. And what's the evidence that it will work? When it became clear that the government were going to implement that policy, before the courts got involved, there was a rush of people at the French coast trying to get over. The French authorities support the Rwanda policy, think it's a good policy.
We've seen the Rwanda files, though, James, the leaked Rwanda files that Nigel Farage revealed here that showed that you're looking at sending 500 people maximum in the first year, and that backlog by 2026 could get to 150,000. That's not success. It's not a deterrent.
As the Prime Minister said, the flights will go. But this is a deterrent, Patrick. We want to stop all those thousands of people who are coming to the French border with the intention of crossing over, putting themselves at risk. This is saying to them that if you come over here to this country illegally, you will be sent away. You'll be sent to Rwanda. And the evidence shows that people who are putting themselves in danger at the French border do not want that. It is part of the suite of measures. It's much needed. The country supports it. And this is the People's Prime Minister delivering on that.
OK, all right. I'm also going to introduce a clip that Rishi Sunak said, which I think is very important, about the NHS, OK? Now, he firmly pinned the NHS backlog now on striking workers. Let's hear it.
We saw that it started to fall because we didn't have strikes for a period at the end of last year, and that has been a real challenge, and I'll just be honest with you about that. But in November, first month, where we had absolutely no strikes in the NHS, do you know what? The waiting list fell by 100,000. Biggest one-month fall in the waiting list in well over a decade outside of COVID. So that gives me the confidence that our plans can work and will work. The industrial action is something we need to work through.
Record NHS backlogs. Is it all the fault of striking doctors?
Well, let's put it into context. We had the pandemic, we've had the strikes. That is the reason why we've got the backlogs that we're seeing at this moment in time. But let me give you this fact, that in the month when we had when the month when we had no NHS strikes, the backlog went down by 100,000.
I've got to pause you there, and I will come back to you. I'm going to go to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who is at the scene for us there in the North East. Christopher, what's going on where you are?
OK, Patrick, all the crowd are leaving here from this People's Forum. Can I ask you, sir, how do you find out? Did you change your mind?
I didn't learn anything really new tonight. There was only kind of one guy who really put him on the spot, two of them, about the COVID vaccines, but nothing really that's kind of swayed me either way.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, madam, have you changed your mind about Rishi Sunak?
No, but I'm a Tory voter, so no. It was impressive.
Sir, have you changed your mind about Mr. Sunak?
Probably not. No.
Sir, any thoughts on that?
I thought it was a lot better than what I expected, to be honest, yeah. He came across sincere, and he's got a lot more personality in the flesh than what he shows on TV, so yeah.
Madam, any thoughts on that? Have you changed your mind on Mr. Sunak?
I've not changed my mind. I'm just still very undecided. I wasn't very impressed with with the answers that were coming back, so yeah, I'm still undecided.
And you, sir?
I thought Rishi was very polished, professional. I thought he was very courteous. I thought the audience were very courteous, apart from a couple of exceptions, where I feared for my life a little bit. But yeah, I thought he came across he's a well-meaning, decent kind of guy.
Will you vote for him?
I'm undecided. I think it's lost. If I'm totally honest, he's he's trying his best, but I don't think the Conservatives can win at the next election.
Sir, as a PM, convince you to vote for him?
He's convinced me to think about it, but what I really am thinking about at the moment is, where do I hand in my expenses claims?
Hey, don't ask me, sir. I'm a near journalist. Please, thank you, sir. Madam, have you changed your mind about Mr. Sunak?
I haven't. I'm still undecided. Yeah.
Madam, and yourself?
I think he seemed very approachable, but I'm still a little undecided, and I'm going to watch with interest what GB News shows us in the future.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sir, any thoughts?
Well, I much prefer him to Keir Starmer, it's for sure.
You stuck with me, yeah? Any thoughts, sir?
No change of mind.
No change?
That's for sure.
Are you voting Conservative or Labour or Lib Dem? Or
Undecided.
Undecided?
Still undecided.
Thank you. And madam, any thoughts about that? How do you go, Mr. Smith? You back Mr. Sunak in election or Mr. Keir Starmer, others?
Again, I haven't decided yet, but I think he's quite approachable, and what he's taken on, right at the time where there was not much for him. He had lots to do, so I guess he's doing a good job.
Yeah. Sir, have you changed your mind about Mr. Sunak? Will you vote for him?
I'll be voting Conservative, but he gave me stock answers tonight.
Okay.
Answers I expected.
And madam, finally. Madam, finally, will you vote Conservative for this election, or Labour, Lib Dem?
I probably won't vote Conservative. I'm more likely to vote Reform after that performance. I was pretty unimpressed with the way he closed off the COVID vaccine-injured person.
Yeah. OK. Well, thank you on that. You heard the response there from the audience. A mixed response, not everyone convinced, but I think the PM would have think he got most of his points across. Back to you.
Yeah. Christopher, thank you very much, and thank you to those wonderful people for stopping and chatting. Some amazing points raised there, and very, very on brand. Look, we have got an exit poll for you at the top of that 10 o'clock hour, so we will find out whether or not that room full of undecided voters have decided now to vote Conservative, or who else. Who did that lady mention there? Well, Richard Tice, leader of Reform UK. He joins me at the end of this hour. But one chap there mentioned a viral moment, and it was a viral moment from this particular showdown with the Prime Minister, and it was all about the vaccines, wasn't it? And we've got a little clip of it now for you.
Hi, Rishi Sunak. I've got so much to say, but such little time. My name is John Watt, and I'm one of the COVID vaccine injured in this country. I want you to look into my eyes, Rishi Sunak, and I want you to look at the pain, the trauma, and the regret I have in my eyes. We have been left with no help at all. Not only am I in here that's vaccine injured, there's another man over there whose life's been ruined by that COVID-19 vaccine. Why are the people who are in charge, who told us all to do the right thing, have left us all to rot and left me and the thousands and the tens of thousands in this country to rot?
My story in the press. Okay. I had to go to the government for comment, and they made me take all the stuff out.
Forgive me both.
I know, I'm happy.
I'm interested in that.
So look, there is a vaccine compensation scheme that's in place, as you alluded to, in the NHS. Obviously, everyone individually will work through their cases. It's difficult for me to comment on anyone's individual case, I'm sure.
The brand new Deputy Party Chairman for the Conservatives, James Daly, is still with me. James, the vaccine injured feel as though they've been left to rot.
Well, as the Prime Minister said, every decision that was taken during the pandemic was taken upon medical advice. We were in a position where we had the fastest rollout of the vaccine in the world. We did everything possible to protect people from what was perceived and what was a virus that was killing people within our country. We took the responsible steps as a government, following the advice to do that. I can't comment on what individuals are going through. I'm very, very sorry for anybody who's going through that. We've got a compensation scheme in place. But the Prime Minister, during the pandemic, not only looked, and as a government, not only took the right decisions upon medical advice, the Prime Minister, when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, and other members of the government had to follow that advice, as he also outlined...
You don't regret maybe pushing the vaccine as much as it was pushed?
The government acted upon medical advice. They acted with the best of intent to try to protect the people in this country. The Prime Minister and the government did that not only in terms of the medical advice, but in terms of financial, in terms of furlough scheme, protecting businesses, protecting individuals. That's why I'm proud to be supporting the Prime Minister.
All right, James, thank you. Can I just ask you to stay there for me, because there's a couple more points I'd love to put to you as well. But I'm just going to enter the fray now. Labour MP Rosie Duffield, who is joining us down the line. Rosie, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. I've got to start firstly. Rishi Sunak was grilled by the audience a little bit there about Rwanda and all of that stuff, but something that I think is really relevant to the Labour Party, Rosie, was he was asked a little bit, wasn't he, about Rochdale, and he mentioned the ongoing issue that Labour have got in Rochdale at the moment, with Afsar Ali, who was part of the Labour Party, made some outrageous comments when it came to October the 7th and Israel being complicit in that as their way of now bombing Gaza and obliterating the Palestinian people, etc. I think I might have a clip of what Sunak said in response to all of this, which I'd just like to play for you and then get your reaction, because it does appear that the Labour Party is in a little bit of a mess over all of this right now. We do have the clip. Let's go.
The party hasn't changed. It's not change, it's a con, right? And that's what you have to remember. A vote for anyone who's not me, who's not your Conservative candidate,